I'm Delia from Delia Creates, and welcome to Lesson 3 of my Crochet Basics series. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to double crochet, and then we're going to make this soft, squishy infinity scarf made with merino wool yarn from We Crochet. I am so excited to have We Crochet sponsoring today's video. They are a beautiful online shop that sells yarn, hooks, and has more patterns and project ideas on their website. Go to crochet.com to check it out. In addition to learning how to double crochet, I'm going to teach you 4 bonus techniques: how to slip stitch, how to work in a looped row, how to join 2 ends together of 2 balls. This scarf actually uses 3, and then I'm going to teach you how to weave in your ends when you're done. I know that can sound like a lot, but it's actually really intuitive and easy to master once we get going. If you missed my first 2 lessons in this series, be sure to go back and give them a look. Lesson 1 talks about how to hold your hook and how to chain stitch, which is the basis of today's project. We won't be single crocheting like we do in Lesson 2, but that video shows you how to work in rows and where to insert your hook in those rows as you work your stitches, which we will be using today. So I suggest starting with that. It also starts you off with an easier project that is a great precursor to today's scarf because it's the same shape as the bow, but just on a larger scale. For this project, we are using a Category 5 or bulky weight yarn. This is a Knit Picks Big O Merino Wool Blend yarn from We Crochet. It's super soft, not scratchy at all, and washable, so it's great for a project like this scarf. We're going to use an N or 9mm hook, which is larger than the suggested hook size on the label, but it will give a looser, chunkier texture. My first Crochet Basics post has size charts if you need more direction on yarn and hook sizes. This yarn comes in a hank, which means we need to wrap it up in a ball before we begin. One tip for wrapping yarn balls is to make sure you wind it loosely. Don't tug on that yarn as it goes around. You'll know you've done it right if you can still squish it after it's all wrapped up. Now we're ready to get started. Tie a slip knot onto your hook and chain 110 times. Be sure to keep your tension nice and loose. It helps to have your non-hook hand pulling downward a little bit on the chain as you work them. Once you have your 110 chains, lay it out into a loop, taking care to untwist it as needed. Instead of working rows back and forth into a rectangle and then sewing it into a loop like we did with the single crochet bows, we're going to seam it together as we go so that we work around and around in a looped row. To do this, we need to slip stitch the last chain you worked to the first chain you worked when you first started. Simply insert your hook into that first chain, yarn over, and then pull through that first chain and the loop on your hook. That's a slip stitch. Then, just as you would with a traditional row, chain 2 to start your first row. Now we're ready to double crochet. This will feel a lot like single crochet, except that you're going to yarn over before you insert your hook into that first chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into that first chain stitch. You will now have 2 loops on your hook and the chain stitch. Now you'll yarn over one more time and pull through just that chain stitch so that you end up with 3 loops on your hook. To complete the stitch, yarn over again. You'll pull through just the first 2 loops on your hook. You now have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over one last time and pull through the last 2 loops on your hook. That's a double crochet stitch. A question I often get when I'm teaching someone how to crochet is, where do I insert my hook? There are so many holes and loops. Where does my hook go? The standard answer is to work in the top 2 loops, but when I'm working the first row in the chain, I find that it looks better to turn what is technically the top 2 loops to face toward me and to work in the side of the chain, or if I'm using technical terms, the back loop and the third loop. If that seems confusing to you, don't worry about that. Just focus on inserting your hook under 2 loops in each chain and you should be fine. Okay, let's rewind this and go over the double crochet stitch in slow motion one more time. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain stitch, yarn over and pull through just that chain stitch so that you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. That's a double crochet stitch. Now work a double crochet stitch in each chain stitch in the rest of the row. To keep yourself from crocheting too tightly, be sure to give yourself plenty of slack from your ball of yarn as you work your stitches. And remember, if you ever need to go backward or if you mess up, you can always pull out your yarn. Just pull on that working yarn that's attached to the ball until you get to the point where you want to restart. Insert your hook into that top loop again and keep going. As you near the end of your first row, do a quick check to make sure your row isn't twisted. The last stitch in a looped row can sometimes be confusing. Be careful not to work in the space left from the previous stitch or under the chains from the beginning of the row. Now we're ready to slip stitch the first row together. Simply insert your hook into the top of the chain 2 or the second chain you worked at the beginning of the row, yarn over, pull through that chain, and then pull through the loop on your hook. Your first looped row is done. Okay, for the second row and every row after this one, you'll start how you started the first row. Chain 2 and double crochet in the first stitch next to your chains. Yarn over and insert your hook under the top 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through just those top 2 loops, then complete your double crochet stitch. If you need help finding the top 2 loops, remember that braided texture that I talked about in the single crochet video that forms on the top of the previous row? Insert your hook underneath that braided texture, but above the bottom or third loop. Work a double crochet stitch in each stitch in the row. When you get to the end of your row, slip stitch it together just like you did with the first row and the chain. You'll repeat this 12 more times for a total of 14 rows. At some point, you may run out of yarn and need to connect 2 balls of yarn together. Leave about a foot of yarn unworked. Tie the end of the first ball to the second ball with a square knot. I like to leave tails on either side of the knot that are about 5 inches long or so I know it won't come undone later. There is a cleaner way to do this, but this is the most basic and easy way to join 2 balls of yarn. Align the tail with the working yarn and work it into your stitches as you go to hide them. The stitches will look slightly thicker, but you otherwise won't notice them. If this feels too awkward, you can leave the tails out and weave them in with a needle at the end. Sometimes it's hard to work every bit of those tails into your stitches. You see I have a little tuft sticking out. That's okay. When I work the next row, it's going to completely disguise the tail so you won't see it anymore. Remember, anytime you want to take a break from your project, all you have to do is pull on that top loop so it comes way out, remove your hook, put it away until you're ready to work on it again. When you're ready to start, insert your hook into that top loop, pull on that working yarn so it's snug around your hook, and then keep going. When you finish your last row, you're ready to tie it off. Cut a tail about 10 inches long and pull it all the way through to make that last slip stitch a true knot. Now you're ready to weave in your ends. Thread the end of one of your tails into a yarn needle and then lay your scarf out flat so you can better see where you need to weave in your ends. Having a long tail will prevent the stitches from coming undone later as the scarf gets used, washed, and pulled on,
and it gives a cleaner finish to the scarf. You essentially need to sew the ends through your stitches, working up and sideways and down until you feel like the tail is well disguised and secured. At the very end, I like to pull the tail tightly, trim it, and then squish the stitches in the scarf to help the tail slip into hiding even more. Repeat the process with any other tails, like the one from the beginning when you were chaining. And that's it, and now you have a beautiful infinity scarf. For more tutorials or for the next lesson in this series, go to my website, deliacreates.com.